we have a constitutional obligation to get the maximum value for our resources. According to the Department of Revenue Commissioner, we get that through our royalties, our severance taxes, our property taxes, and our corporate income taxes. Ensuring that we get a corporate income tax from the producers is one way that we follow our constitutional obligation to get the maximum value for our resource. ConocoPhillips pays it and has paid it for decades. Exxon pays it and has paid it for decades. BP paid it for decades. However, when BP sold their assets, it was sold to a company, or an individual rather, that made a very wise decision to take advantage of our tax structure, and instead of incorporating as a C corporation, incorporated as an S corporation. I think any one of us would have probably made that exact same decision. That was a smart financial move. However, when that company came to Alaska, they needed the support from the legislature. They attended hearings put on by this legislature, and they were asked this very question, as was mentioned by the carrier of the amendment. They were asked, as a private company, what is your position on paying corporate income taxes? What do you think they said? When they needed our support, when they needed the legislature to agree to this sale, so that we wouldn't go and ask the federal government to block it, they said, and if I may quote, Mr. President, if the bodies say there is a corporate income tax, of course we'll pay it. We will be a good corporate citizen to the state and pay our fair share. That is a direct quote from the company that bought the largest producing oil field in North America when they needed our support. And then, of course, they did what you would expect them to do. They tried to stop it. And the governor, our current governor at the time, several years after that, in a fiscal policy working group, recognized that this was a problem. Everybody recognizes this as a problem. You talk to any of the producers privately, and they'll tell you, of course they should be paying it. How is it fair that Conoco pays this, Exxon pays this, and one corporation gets this loophole, doesn't have to pay it? That's not fair. That's just not fair. They recognize it, and they also recognize that if we don't fix this, we're running out of money. Oil used to fund 90% of our budget. It now funds 23% of our budget. This idea that we're going to give away our oil and make it up on volume hasn't worked out well for us. And so everybody recognizes this is a problem. And the governor himself, through his revenue commissioner a few years ago, testified in front of a fiscal policy working group that if the legislature passed this very thing that we're proposing today, he'd sign it into law. Now, his position may have changed since then, but that's what he said back then. Now, there's an article in the New York Times today. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I'm going to read the headline from that article, if I could, Mr. President.
Without objection.
A critical political season could decide if Alaska is a failed petro state. Imagine that. One of the largest, probably the largest newspaper in the world is questioning whether Alaska is a failed petro state. When you have countries in the Middle East, oil-producing countries, some of which are getting 99% of the value of their oil, 99% rate. They're building islands in the middle of the ocean, putting billion-dollar office buildings. And here we are in Alaska. We have an effective tax rate of 3.3% this year. Next year, it'll be 3.45%. We can't go on like this. This is a small change. How is it possible that the company that is managing the largest oil field in North America pays zero corporate income taxes? How is that? Alaskans ask, how is that even possible? If you were to put this in front of the Alaskan people, this would be 80, 90%. This This is not even close. Of course they should be paying it. Of course they should. We've been debating this issue for years. For years. Martin Luther King said, the time is always right to do what's right. Is this the ideal situation to do this? Maybe not. But this is what we have in front of us. This is the time that we have in front of us. And we should do the right thing and vote yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wielechowski.